you should have checked in on him because I knew what was going on in the office. So as coaches, we should remember that beyond the coaching, the life coaching we have with our clients, how else are we supporting the clients? I know we're really busy, else can we collaborate, partner, and support the client? So in between sessions, we have to so we don't need to make I felt very empowered. At the end of the session, I was like, oh my God, I have answers within myself. And then now I'm coach. Having seen that video, when you ask the client questions, like, what would you try not to over-rely on it or to over-complicate things. Use the simple tools that you know.
In the shape of giving that advice. All right. What I would actually say is awareness. So yeah, the most important thing I can leave with you is awareness. No, it's okay, all right, awareness. What's the next thing?
Applause for the president. Thank you, Presido. Coach AK, thank you very much. Round of, thank you very much, Coach AK. Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. No, Amike. So we have 3 topics we would like we are looking at today. The first one is skills development. Skills development workshop. So we have 3 classes for the workshops that we have, 30 minutes max, and we'll come back here and we can wrap up. And it's going to be, we are focusing on new coaching techniques. So that particular class, we focus on new coaching techniques. So if you need to know new coaching techniques from the experts that we have in the room, please, you stay somewhere in front here. So we're all going to be in front here. The second workshop would be personal development and growth, exploring self-awareness, emotional intelligence, and how you can build resilience as a coach. We're going to go right to the back of the all. So new coaching techniques here, self-awareness, emotional intelligence, and building resilience. The tips, you go to the back there. And the final one is business growth. Strategies for building a thriving coaching practice. You want to know how to make that money in pounds and dollars. We're going to exit the room. We have a class outside for that. Okay? So